Oleg had always been a skeptic. Ghost stories, paranormal activity, haunted houses. He dismissed it all as superstition or exaggerated tales. But what happened to him in that apartment changed everything. It started when he found a ridiculously cheap rental in an older Soviet-era building. It wasn't fancy, just a small two-room apartment with peeling wallpaper and a dimly lit hallway. When he met the landlord, the man's behavior was strange. "Are you sure you want this place?" the landlord asked. His tone was hesitant. "Why wouldn't I?" Oleg responded. The landlord fidgeted with his keys. "No reason. Just that the last tenant left suddenly. Didn't even take his things." Oleg smirked. "People move all the time." The landlord didn't argue. He handed over the keys and left in a hurry. But the moment Oleg stepped inside, he felt a shift in the air, like something was waiting for him.
The first evening passed quietly. Oleg unpacked, set up his workspace, and had a late dinner. At around midnight, he went to bed. The apartment was silent, almost too silent. At 3:14 a.m., he woke up for no reason. His throat felt dry. He reached for a bottle of water, but something caught his eye. The bedroom door was slightly open. He was certain he had closed it before sleeping. Then he noticed it, a dark figure standing in the doorway. Tall, featureless, completely motionless. Oleg's breath caught in his throat. His body was frozen in place. He blinked, and the figure was gone. The door was still open, but there was nothing there. Was it a dream, his imagination, or had someone really been standing there? Shaking off the fear, he got up, shut the door, and went back to sleep. But the unease remained, unseen presence. Each night, the disturbances worsened. At first, it was just the door opening on its own. Then came the whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs just beyond his hearing. On the fifth night, something new happened. He woke up to the sound of soft footsteps in the apartment, not outside in the hallway. Inside. Oleg held his breath, listening. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, moving from the kitchen to the hallway, to his bedroom door. Then they stopped. He reached for his phone and turned on the flashlight. The door was open again. His heart pounded in his chest. He got up, walked to the door, and looked into the dark hallway. Nothing. But just as he turned back to bed, a shadow moved across the mirror, and he wasn't the one who cast it, the last tenant. Oleg couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong with this place. So he decided to ask around. He spoke to an elderly neighbor, a woman who had lived in the building for decades. She hesitated before answering. "You're in that apartment, aren't you?" she asked. "What do you mean, that apartment?" The woman sighed. "The last tenant was a young man like you. He only lived there for a month." "What happened to him?" Oleg asked. She glanced around nervously before lowering her voice. "He was scared. He said something was watching him. He set up cameras to prove it." Oleg leaned in. "And?" The woman hesitated. "He showed me the footage once. I wish I'd never seen it." "What was on it?" Her expression darkened. At night, while he slept, the door would open, and something would step inside. Something. Oleg's stomach twisted. She nodded. A shadow. But it wasn't just standing there. It was moving closer each night. Oleg's blood ran cold. The woman shook her head. One night he disappeared. The landlord said he just left, but... She trailed off. But what? She lowered her voice to a whisper. The cameras caught something else that night. What? She stared at him. The last footage showed him sitting up in bed, staring at the corner of the room. And then, her next words made Oleg shiver. Then he looked straight into the camera and said, "It's here." And then the screen cut to black. The horror revealed. But that night, Oleg set up his own camera. He placed it on a tripod facing the door and went to bed. Once again, he woke up at 3:14 a.m. The door was open. The air was ice cold. And then he heard it, a deep, raspy breath, right next to him. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He felt a pressure on the bed, as if someone was sitting beside him. Slowly, he turned his head and saw a dark figure crouching right next to him. His heart stopped. It had no face, no features, just a black void where a face should be. It leaned in closer. Then it whispered, "I see you now." Oleg screamed and turned on the light. The room was empty, but the door was wide open. And in the mirror, the shadow was still there. The last recording, Oleg called his friend, begging him to come over. But by the time his friend arrived, Oleg was gone. His phone was still recording, lying on the floor. The final seconds of the video showed Oleg sitting up in bed, staring at the corner of the room. Then he looked straight into the camera and whispered, "It's here." The screen glitched and cut to black. The cycle continues. A few months later, the apartment was listed for rent again. A new tenant moved in, and on his first night, he woke up to find the bedroom door slightly open. At first, he thought it was nothing, until he noticed the scratches on the mirror. They weren't random. They were words, faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. "I see you. Would you dare to stay in an apartment like this? Because if you stare into a dark doorway long enough, something might stare back."